Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Daigle, and I am a senior in classics and modern culture and media. And my take on the air element of this conference was to study mass media and how media outlets cover environmental damage, particularly with regard to the Taylor Energy oil spill. A little bit of background. The Taylor Energy oil spill occurred in 2004 during Hurricane Ivan, when an underwater mudslide disconnected the platform from 23 different low-pressure wells just a few miles off the coast of southeastern Louisiana. And since then, for 15 years, the well has been a constant source of dirty oil in the coast, or on the coast. And the oil spill has been generally under wraps with low coverage since 2015, when lawsuits started to allow information from the government and from the company itself to be publicized. And due to lack of major publicity, this is a case where single headlines and a few instances of journalistic framing can convey meaning to informational consumers. And my main question of this research was specifically how to analyze news coverage of this oil spill, specifically on NOLA.com, which is the largest southeastern Louisiana news website, to find any biases or implicit judgments in articles covering environmental damage due to the oil industry. My original thought was that due to the immense part of the oil industry in Louisiana's economy, that people would more or less continue to let this slide. But my findings were actually quite more complicated than that. The first press to pick this up was the Associated Press. They first wired stories about the Taylor Energy oil spill to the southeastern Louisiana press. They've been covering the oil spill's legal proceedings since April 2015, when they investigated the government reports of oil amounts, which they found to be severely underreported. In a lot of ways, these articles written by the Associated Press were focused on money, politics, and legality. They created a discourse of legal proceedings, money that is being sued for, whether or not regulators needed to monitor this leak legally. Essentially, it became words like litigation, obligations, and regulation appear much more often than environment, pollution, or coastal decline. The AP stories also tend to give Taylor Energy the last word in their articles, giving Taylor Energy's data or spokesperson accounts at the very end of the article, which kind of leaves the reader with more of an understanding of Taylor's position than any other government or environmental group's position. And there was also very little accountability that was given by, accounts given by environmental groups. In all, environmental groups were only interviewed when it came to legal proceedings. The Times-Picayune, which is the company that runs NOLA.com, actually began to dig into environmental data or lack thereof. The first story actually uses pretty scathing language to describe the severe length of time that the Coast Guard took to request Taylor Energy to research environmental damage. It actually seemed to be a front page headline that used, after 14 years, the Coast Guard finally asked Taylor Energy to get this data. And more than anything, I think that it's important to bring attention to the fact that as news articles are generally expected to be unbiased, still these local reportings began to have some sort of value judgments that placed accountability on the government and Taylor to actually do something about this and to create more of a fuss about this, because this has been going on for 15 years. The first story brings attention to the company's liquidation soon after the Coast Guard ordered them to deal with the oil slicks in 2008 as well. The framing of these articles gives the last word to those that offer the latest information or comment, and that is usually the environmental groups. The Times-Picayune also shows that Taylor Energy deals mostly in prioritizing money in these issues, while other groups deal with environmental standards of the problem of pollution. And this finally brings me to an article that was published just a few days ago on April 7th by Bob Marshall, who is a local journalist. And he offered a case for exactly what I'm arguing, that framing environmental damage in certain ways, especially by those who convey information to the general public, can be particularly harmful if presented in ways that erase culpability or agency. This article was specifically about using certain language to erase any kind of agency on the hands of the government or certain economic industries. What I found, particularly in the local southeastern Louisiana community, there seems to be a move towards incorporating those value judgments necessary to hold sources of environmental damage accountable. Thank you.